Today we'd like to talk about freedom of choice. If to look at our life, we see that it's not that frequent that we choose something in life. Maybe it seems to us so, but if we read recent research on the topic, we can see that birth, death, traits, even political views, it's all defined by society, or that it's embedded in us genetically. So nature leaves us no choice, but we'd like to examine it from the Kabbalistic point of view. The great Kabbalist of the 20th century, Bala Sulam, wrote an article about it, freedom of choice, and let's start going over it. He begins by explaining the 4 factors that influence our development and define our free choice. The first factor, he writes that it's called the source. It's the genetic information of the person. Probably it says DNA. I don't know if back then, at the times of Bala Sulam, they already discovered the DNA in the beginning of the 20th century. No, not yet, but still. There are such informative records that exist. In Kabbalah, it's called records, reshimot. He says that ideas, thoughts, opinions, it all loses its previous form and transforms, comes to us in a form of tendencies, qualities. That's the first factor, the source, and obviously says that it's something that we do not choose, it's a given by nature. The second factor, these are the unchanging qualities. If you could explain what that is, meaning that every source contains changing and unchanging qualities. Like he gives the example with the wheat, meaning I can't change myself fundamentally. If I was born, then I'm a man with certain qualities, traits, etc., etc. But within the boundaries of that, I can change something, but the boundaries themselves I cannot change. We even see it on ourselves and our life from experience that in us there are such givens, data, that we can't change. He gives an example that from a grain of wheat, you'll always grow wheat. And from an elephant will come an elephant. Right, nothing else will come. But under the influence of possibly the surrounding environment, other influences, we can change its inner certain special qualities, but that's it. Depending on the environment that we put it in, etc. So the third factor, these are these qualities that were given to us by nature, meaning there are qualities that do not change and such that can change under the influence of the environment. He gives an example that if a person, for example, is stingy by nature, then if you put him in a certain environment, suppose where there is surplus, then very possibly that this quality will turn into the complete opposite, or won't develop in him at all. Yeah. And the fourth factor are external influences. It's also one of the factors that defines the stages of the development of the created being. For example, the climate, global warming, crisis, that can also, for example, influence that quality of stinginess. Suppose if we live in a normal society and everything's fine, it doesn't develop. But if all of a sudden there's a world crisis, problems, it's very possible that it might change. These 4 factors, do they all influence a person at the same time? At the same time, and for the time being, in combinations that are not understood or clear to us. Meaning we don't clearly understand what is going on with them. The only thing that we do need to understand is how are we dependent on them, and in what state in each given moment in time can we influence them. Influence them selectively, meaning in a certain direction with a certain purpose. That for us is the main thing. How do we define what is preferable for us to receive from ourselves or from others, suppose from raising our children, etc., and how to influence them in every given moment in time, on what level, etc. So we can draw a conclusion that the only factor that we can change is the environment. Right, and only. However, the environment, it's not simply the environment. First of all, we need to set the end goal. We need to understand what do we want to get as a result of our efforts, actions. Maybe we'll invest a lot into education, but as a result, we'll get practically nothing. Depending on what will we put our, so to speak, emphasis on, what would we like to change? We need to understand where are the boundaries of our opportunities, abilities, what are the best means that we have for it, how can we approach a person that he himself will take part in his changes, etc. Meaning here everything depends not only on us, but also on the subject itself and the surrounding environment. So heredity and the environment are factors that influence a person on the unconscious level. Heredity, that's already clear. And if I've already chosen an environment, then from the point of view of Kabbalah, and I think also psychology, that if you've already chosen an environment, then it influences you 100%. Even if we don't clearly choose, but we're in some kind of contact, because we're always in contact with some kind of environment, it still influences us more or less, more explicitly or less. And also, usually it's not clear to us, ourselves, how do we put ourselves under the influence of that environment. Maybe I don't even want to be in contact with it, and still it has a very strong influence over me. So here, we really need to do some serious work to really explore this in order for a person to understand that the main thing for him is to sort out his environment, what is influencing him. And in particular, the situation, the still environment that I'm in, maybe it has a stronger influence on me than anything else, more than people even, etc. Dispositions me towards completely impractical actions, reactions, and so on. Meaning you need to thoroughly examine the influence of the environment on a person in all of its parameters, the still, vegetative, animate, and the human level. So we can say that also the still nature has an impact over the person. Of course. Doesn't the weather influence us, influence our mood, how we feel, everything? The house that I'm in, the city I'm in. I'm not talking about the people, but about everything else, the so-called, so to speak. Still, it has a strong impact on me. Take a person, put him in a different place, put him in a forest, or the countryside, and you'll see a completely different person. Meaning, not the society necessarily that surrounds him, but the nature that surrounds him. This is the factor that I'm getting at. There's research, for example, when many people look at a certain person and suppose he doesn't know about it, he still feels that influence of other people on him. Right. It said that if you're next to a person who's depressed, that can pass on to you as well. Absolutely. And if we're talking about a society that's depressed, then obviously it's passed on, etc. Okay. Now, you said that everything's defined by the goal. Why is it made so that I, as an individual, am under the influence of society? What does it give me? Eventually, how can I use it? We're talking about Kabbalah. How can I use it for my spiritual development? Because with the help of the surrounding environment, I can control myself, govern myself. If I'm a closed system, and I can't do anything about myself or inside myself, and no matter how much I turn, it's like a dog around its tail. Nothing will come as a result, because I have my specific qualities and traits, and if I'll operate with them, then it'll be the same me. How do I nonetheless make it so it won't be the same me, but that I'll as if come out of myself and influence myself from the outside? How's that possible? And for that, Kabbalah, it gives us a very interesting principle. It says, the surrounding environment. That if you will clearly, selectively relate to your environment, that this is good, this is bad for me, I want for this to have a stronger influence over me, this a lesser influence, and this way I choose those sources that influence me, and I somehow sort them, and I put myself under their influence. And this way, I govern myself, and not myself directly, but through the surrounding environment. Maybe I need to be under the influence of a certain group of people for 2 hours, another group for 3 hours, listen to something on TV, read something from the newspaper, go on the internet. I need to control all of these things. Which external influences do I choose over myself? Because this way, I make myself, really create myself, meaning it is a process of creating myself by myself already, and that's what's important. And this is my freedom of choice. This is the kind of opportunity, the kind of freedom that the Creator gave us. Can we say that all of a person's actions, meaning his states in this world, are predetermined? Yeah. Everything besides his aspiration for spiritual development is what Bala Sulam writes. Well, for spiritual development, a person also has a certain disposition. He feels that he's drawn to something because in our world, we're not simply flowing so in a whirlpool, but this whirlpool, eventually, if we look back, for example, I look from the height of my, suppose, 70 years ago, then I see how I was directed towards something all the time, even though that sometimes these were very turbulent streams that took me from country to country, from society to society, etc. But it was somehow all a goal-oriented movement, not by me, but goal-oriented. And at some point along the way, I'm given the opportunity to take the wheel into my own hands, suppose, the oars, and to guide my boat into a certain current, maybe into some different channel. I need to understand it, acknowledge it, to somehow nonetheless define what kind of sails do I need to put up, how I need to nonetheless guide this little boat of mine in life. This is given to a person, and actually a person doesn't understand it. 99.9% of the people don't understand it, but there are people that nonetheless somehow try to direct themselves towards something, but still don't understand what and how. And now, in our time, when we're living in these very turbulent times, where we're drawn by whirlpools to some unknown, the wisdom of Kabbalah is revealed to us, and it explains that actually you have an opportunity to influence your fate. You have freedom of choice, despite that these initial givens of yours influence you. But it doesn't matter. Still, you were given an opportunity through the environment to influence yourself. Only you need to each time choose a more and more correct environment. And what is a correct environment? This you need to choose. Meaning you don't choose the environment. The environment, you strictly find it and enter it. And to choose the environment, you need according to the goal that is set before you. You need to choose your purpose in life and accordingly to choose your environment. If I want to be a musician or an artist or a thief or whatever, scientist, accordingly, I choose the environment in which I want to develop myself in order to be closer to that goal that attracts me, that I think that is necessary for me. So, can we say that for tens of thousands of years of human development, man had no freedom of choice? And at a certain evolutional stage, the freedom of choice appeared before the person, and he, as if by chance, finds a certain environment, and that's not freedom of choice either, but when he's already under the influence of that environment, how he works with it, there it begins. Yes, meaning the measure of his subordination to that environment in order to absorb from that environment all the qualities and forces necessary for the attainment of the goal, here appears as freedom of choice. Meaning nature requires of us conscious choice, meaning if I was simply born in some family, some country, in some point in history, it's not up to me, obviously, and it all influences me. But when I already am inside a society, then I apply my own efforts. And Balasulam writes, he who strives to continually choose a better environment is worthy of success, not because of his good thoughts or deeds which come to him without his choice, but because of his effort to acquire a good environment which brings him these good thoughts and actions. A person who chooses a better environment each time is rewarded with the next better, more advanced state. Meaning, if good thoughts appear in me, it doesn't come from me, or bad thoughts, it doesn't come from me. Right, but what to do with them, that's up to you. Or what to do that in the next moment I'll have good thoughts, it depends on me. That depends on you. Meaning, about the future, you can practically, as if, program yourself. As if. Because still, in order to develop in you further freedom of choice, your settings will be thrown off in order to give you an opportunity to more and more orient yourself towards the goal. But it's like when, suppose, from the sea you enter a certain river, through a certain channel, and then there are twists in this and that direction, and you're being guided all the time, and you need to go further. So, to be a good person or a bad person, to perform a good or bad action, it's not up to the person? No, it isn't. Only by choosing your environment, after that, as a result of that, you perform actions, good or bad. And always, you need to try and be as follows, that in relation to the previous level, in the current moment, you're doing a good deed. In relation to the next level, in the current moment, you're doing a bad action. And then the next degree will be better. And don't be despaired if you're shown the next degree and, you see, you're not like you should be, but it's in order to push you forward. In Kabbalah, does the concept of fate exist, meaning that you can't change it and that's it? Good, bad, no matter. Obviously, there is fate that's embedded in each of us to begin with. About what state do we need to reach? Depends on us only the style in which we advance toward that end goal, towards our final state. But actually, besides that, there's nothing. Meaning necessarily I'll come to that state that is predetermined for me. But I also now exist from that state. You see, actually, I'm there, but in order to realize my freedom of choice, I'm here. So, when we say fate, that we can't change it, what we mean is the end goal, to be like the Creator, to come to the end of correction, as it's written in all Kabbalistic books, that this is the fate for everyone. Yes. And how do I get there? That depends on the person. That is freedom of choice. Here, what's expressed is the understanding of the program of the Creator, your consent with the program of the Creator, your devotion to make an effort where you wish to justify that program, when you agree with it, even though that advancing toward that goal usually is against your ego. Well, I'll ask more simply, not in relation to the end of correction, that's clear. Suppose, who do I get married with, kids I'll have, problems I'll have, etc. What profession will I have? Is that fate? People say there's fate. Can you change that? It's complicated, practically, in our world, because for that, you need to already, in advance, educate these future couples to understand the meaning, the purpose of life, the realization of that goal. How much are they ready to choose them by the measure to which they're prepared, understand what do they need to sacrifice, concede, and to the contrary, in what should they help and support one another mutually to attain that goal. I mean, here there needs to be very serious work done. I hope that, if not in our generation, then in the next, that people will work on it, because eventually humanity will come to a state where, for sure, it'll be detached from any ability to resolve family problems, meaning people won't get married, they won't want to have kids, they won't understand what is it all for. So much so that even their sexual instincts will be frozen in them, meaning it's a problem that will already be resolved through the question of suffering. So why change something if I understand, believe in that there's some kind of higher force that's leading you by way of suffering, and in that you do not realize yourself as a human being? If you flow with the current, then you're an animal. So if I don't apply conscious efforts in order to change myself, always this force works on me like on an animal, and in that moment you're considered an animal and not a human being. You're considered a human being, called a human being, only when you yourself see the goal and apply efforts to come closer to it. Meaning the natural evolutional development is always through suffering. It's not suffering. It is the feeling of that lack which you now need to complete by your own actions. How else could it be if I'm a mile away from my goal? Then I feel that I still need to go this mile, I still need to do something, and of course that awakens suffering in me because I already want to be at the goal. But on the other hand, I need to understand that advancing toward that goal, it's not the question of the mile, but it's about changing in me certain inner qualities. Can we say that in the material world a person can't change anything, but only his spiritual states? There he can somehow influence them. Of course. And the corporeal, material world will change accordingly. The material world altogether, even the still vegetative and animate nature and our inner still vegetative and animate nature inside the person, they'll all change depending on the efforts that we put in order to attain the purpose of our creation. Suppose today all mass media writes that we're on the verge of a third world war. The question is, if there is fate, humanity has fate, person has fate, and it is already a given that there will be a war. No. It is not predetermined. The only predetermined state is the final end goal. So predetermined is only the end goal. Yes, and how do you get there? You drive your own boat, and so does everyone else. And what about people that can tell the future? No, they can't be 100% certain. It's possible to change the future. And I'll tell you furthermore, depending on what person and what future. If you're simply talking about a person off the street, you can see his future because he doesn't participate in the formation of his future. So people that feel more subtle matter can see what will happen with that person. Of course, like you see on a child, what's he doing, running around, what will he get, etc. So all those fortune tellers, they see man's future state, who's not on the degree of man, but on the animal level. And they too are on the animal level, only with more sensitive qualities. They're more of an animal than that person. By the way, animals very clearly feel nature. Of course, animals can tell the future. They feel it. Right? A dog next to its owner, for example, feels. So there are people that are, let's say, closer to nature, to the animate level, and they can feel the future states. Of course. But it's not something that a person can change. And you're saying that the development of all of humanity, and now that many people already have free choice, then it's hard to predict or impossible. I wouldn't say that many people have freedom of choice. They have an opportunity, a chance, but they don't use it. For that, they need to come to Kabbalah. They need to understand how to do it. They need to be inside a group, under the influence of the group, to draw upon themselves a special energy, force, in order to advance in a certain direction. They don't have that. So a person who studies Kabbalah draws upon himself a certain type of light, influence. The influence of nature, a simply amplified influence of nature. Nature is leading us forward all the time, one way or another. And if we enter a group, then in that way, we draw upon ourselves an increased influence of nature. It's like we generate it. And this way we advance, we accelerate our development. We draw that force, and what? It leads us forward. It develops us internally. What does it bring us to? We need to come in our inner states to equivalence of form with the Creator. That means what? To the quality of bestowing love. This is what nature is leading us to. Only all of humanity is advancing toward that by way of blows and suffering in the meantime. And if you're advancing by yourself, then you turn all of this suffering into good and love, actually. So the quality of bestowal and love appears as the connection, emotional connection between people. From it, we get a force that develops us in a good way, by way of good. So nature, we can say that nature, by different sufferings, which is the natural way of development, leads us in a certain way for us to connect, because only when we're connected, we are similar to the Creator. Suppose. Or we ourselves, consciously, without waiting for the suffering or anything, we ourselves already understanding from the wisdom of Kabbalah what is nature supposed to lead us toward, we see that we're not getting closer to the Creator, and we already feel that as suffering, even though that practically the suffering doesn't exist, but that's how we envision it to ourselves. And then we can yearn for connection, draw upon ourselves the so-called upper surrounding light, and it will develop us faster than everyone else. So, if going down to a lower level, like animals, nature for billions of years united cells until it united them into more complex organisms, and we see that it's good. That more complex organisms appeared, they feel more. Obviously, the spectrum of sensations is much greater than in an amoeba. I understand that in the same way, nature is pushing us on the level of society to unite in the same way. Well put. Not in bodies, but in feelings, in emotion, in heart, in mind, in intellect. If we will achieve a state where our feelings will be in the same general system, our intellect will be in the same system, then we'll comprise such a powerful society that will be on the level of the Creator. Meaning, we'll rise above all of nature to a state of eternity, wholeness, and perfection. So on the one hand, it's good that we're all different, and we see that nature is developing us, individualism is growing all the time. It's predetermined by the Creator in order for us to be more corrected and attain perfection. So what will this oneness be in? Where we're all different, like different organs in the body, that there's the liver, kidneys, they're all different. What we see today in technology and computers and everything's built on plus, minus, etc. So, the purpose of the organism is to, survive. The life of the entire organism is more important than the life of a particular organ or a how. But here, it's to the contrary. It's the quality of integrality, that each particle, each quality is as important as all the others and all of them put together. Meaning we don't concede anything here. We don't sacrifice anything. So what do we need to unite in? We need to unite in one goal, and for the sake of this goal, to all the time more and more unite in order to attain it. The end goal is our complete connection. So we need to all the time, between ourselves, to come closer and closer together to attain that common goal. And the common goal, and it's also written in the wisdom of Kabbalah, is adhesion with the Creator. Our general state, where we're all united together in heart and intellect, That is called the Creator. So what we'll feel, we'll call Creator. Right. So people simply need to come to a common understanding of what is the Creator because each understands it his own way. Like we said in the beginning of the show, that from that end goal, from the shattering, all this cascaded and came to the lowest state that we're in today. So we're all ascending back to our common root. And that actually concludes the purpose of our development. And this is our free choice. The freedom of choice is to advance toward that, not through suffering and being pricked from behind, but by our own participation and through the environment. Of course, through the environment. Okay, thank you very much. Today we talked about freedom of choice. Till next time, all the best.